Hey everyone, Reese here, and welcome back to Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming and technology. Hope you're all doing well out there. It's another gloriously sunny and warm weekend here in the UK, and that's right, it is actually warm for once, so that's nice, although I have just checked the forecast and it's supposed to be raining horrifically for pretty much the entire week after that. And then, I think the weekend after that, I'm running the London Marathon, which is quite exciting. 26.2 miles around the centre of London. I know I said I was going to do a live stream to raise some money for that, but unfortunately, I kind of tentatively talked about the Friday the 11th, which of course, if you're listening to this, will either be, today or today for not much longer, or yesterday. I know I kind of tentatively put that date forward, but unfortunately I completely forgot that I have another commitment. So unfortunately that's not going to happen this weekend. Maybe it will happen next weekend. I'm not quite sure. Time is rapidly running out, but I have put the word out there and of course put the link out there. And I've raised £2,188 of my £2,500 target, which apparently is 87%, according to the Just Giving page. So thank you ever so much to everyone out there who has donated. I know a significant proportion of that has come from my YouTube community. So thank you. I'm ever so grateful for that. And of course, any money donated via that page does go directly to the charity, to Breast Cancer Now, who do a lot of fantastic work with breast cancer sufferers and, of course, people recovering from it as well. So really great charity, and the training is going very, very well indeed. I am running it with my wife, Catherine, and she has hurt her ankle ever so slightly, so our training run last weekend was cut short, but it is a very minor injury, and hopefully it's looking like that's not going to be a problem. Of course, we're starting to kind of taper and reduce the mileage now anyway, so hopefully that's not going to be an issue. Either way, she's going to run it and either suffer the consequences afterwards, which is very brave of her, or I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay in my expert runner opinion. But anyway, that is that. Once again, thank you. I would love to do the live stream at some point. To be honest, I have until after the marathon to actually get the monies in, so it may well end up being after that. But we will come up with something that works. We definitely will. Anyway, let's get on with my first story for this week, so I can get all of this wrapped up and uploaded, go home and have a nice beer in the sun. My first story this week was submitted by Katrina, a regular commenter and member of the community over on my Discord server, and it is indeed her very first submission to these rambles, or the first one in quite a long time. I think I've featured something that she's done in the past. I can't remember. In a previous life, in a previous incarnation of these rambles, before we started taking submissions via the Discord. And unfortunately, because I recorded last week's episode earlier than I usually would, just missed the deadline for last week's episode. So here it is this week. And this is all about Grand Prix 2. Now, I remember the original Jeff Crammon's Grand Prix, which was released on the PC and, of course, the Atari ST and the Amiga back in the day. And, apparently the sequel, Grand Prix 2, which did pass me by, was a DOS exclusive released in 1996. And there has been a development as far as this game is concerned. So, I thought this looked really interesting. I do remember enjoying the original back in the day. So this is a mod for Grand Prix 2, and this has been published over on the Grand Prix 2 forum, grandprix2.de. Which is running on PHP-BB. And so this is a native x86 Windows port of this game. So it's like a modern remaster, I guess. Although it's not really a remaster, it is more kind of a source port. We'll go with source port, that's a good one. And there is a whole thread over here about the game. It's been posted over here. It's working on Windows 11, on modern Windows, and you can download it and you can play it, which is absolutely fantastic. But the topic of this particular video that has been submitted over on a channel called Ted Meat, which is a fantastic name. That's meat as in, Ted Meat, it's a mod. It's a weather mod for Grand Prix 2. Now, of course, the game when it was originally released in 1996 didn't really have variable weather conditions. Let's hit play on this so you can actually watch this. But yes, this video shows off this new mod, which adds varying variable weather conditions to the game. So, of course, you've got the lovely, gloriously bright and sunny, as you might expect. Yeah, it adds overcast weather and indeed rain to the game as well. And the interesting thing about this is that the weather conditions actually affect stuff like the handling and the performance of the cars as well, which I thought was really impressive. So, obviously, if it's absolutely bucketing it down with rain, your traction is going to be reduced, and even like the temperature affects the performance of the cars as well, according to this video. So, of course, if it's hot, the air is much thicker, and that affects the performance, degrades the performance of the engines. And if the air is cooler, then yeah, they can suck more of that air in, and the cars can actually perform better and accelerate and go a bit faster. So I thought that was quite interesting. And it's interesting that this wasn't really implemented in the game originally, because that kind of time around the mid-90s, I think a lot of these types of games were starting to experiment with stuff like that. Obviously, perhaps not the extreme levels of simulation that we have nowadays in modern games, but you know, it certainly would have been quite a big selling point. But nice to see that this has been added, and also interesting to me, at least, to learn that this is a thing, this modern source port of this game. You know, really fantastic Formula One racing game back in the day. Let's have a look at more of the actual footage here, because we're just looking at the menus there. There we go. So yeah, look at this rain. We've got actual spray. We've got the rain coming down from the sky. We've got the clouds. The track turns blue to signify the fact that it is wet. Obviously, it looks a bit like a river, but hey, I guess they've got to do, you know, they've got to work with what they're given as far as the limitations of the game engine are concerned. But also, you know, as a port, I mean, it looks super smooth. It looks like it works really well, and yeah, something that I'd quite like to check out, I think. So, two bits of news there. Thank you to Katrina. The first being that this modern source port, x86 GP2, is a thing, and secondly, that there is a weather mod for it, which I thought was really interesting. So if you want to go and download this and check it out for yourself, of course, the links will be down in the description in the usual places, as they always are with all of the stories in these rambles. What a fantastic start to this week. So if you are a regular listener to these rambles, or indeed a regular viewer of my YouTube channel over on Control-Alt-Reese, you will no doubt be aware that Windows 95 has a very special place in my heart. It's something I've covered a few times on the channel, and yeah, it's 30 years old this year as well, believe it or not. I remember when it was released. I remember on our family 486 PC, we had a DX4100, which I have talked about at length on my channel before. It was running DOS 6.2 and Windows 3.11, and I remember the day that one of my dad's, guy that my dad worked with, showed up with, I don't think it was an entirely legitimate copy, I must say, and yeah, we're installing it from however many floppy disks it was, and getting to experience Windows 95 for the very first time. And to be honest, you know, a lot of people will say, well, why bother installing 95 when you can install 98 on your retro PCs, but yeah, I don't know. It has a lot of nostalgia for me. Very historically important, as you know. So why am I waffling on about Windows 95? Well, of course, we've got that 30-year anniversary this year, and there will be some stuff happening, I'm sure, across the course of the year to mark that occasion. And it's also quite a big anniversary for Microsoft itself this year as well, which I will be talking about a little bit in a future story in this ramble. But for now, let's focus on Windows 95. So this is a story over on PCGuide.com, although it has been covered pretty much everywhere, all over the internet. This wasn't submitted to me, I don't think. This is one that keeps popping up on my radar. And this is to do with the startup sound from Windows 95. Of course, all those earlier versions of Windows made noises when you started them up or shut them down, or something horrible happened. And modern Windows doesn't really do that, does it? Which I think is a shame. I think PCs should be noisier. I guess that's a separate topic. But yeah, the headline here is that the Windows 95 startup sound is now historically significant, as it has been enshrined in the NRR, which is the National Library of Congress National Recording Registry. So, of course, the Library of Congress, quite an important library of all sorts of historical documents in America, going back to, you know, kind of the founding of the country and even before. I sound like I know what I'm talking about here, but to be fair, I have no idea what the Library of Congress is, other than that. I think that's about right. Is that about right? Sounds about right. And apparently it has a national recording registry where they add historically significant sound recordings to the actual library. So the story here, Windows 95 was the operating system that allowed Microsoft to go mainstream. It opened up PCs to many people who lived far outside the tech enthusiast bubble. Now its iconic startup sound has been officially recognised as having historic value. Windows 95 democratized the PC by making the user interface easy to understand and control. It was also one of the first to emphasize multimedia features and made it possible for people to make and share art and music. Bit of a stretch, but okay. It was also the first version of Windows to include Internet Explorer, letting many take their first steps into the World Wide Web as it was known in those days. The startup chime can still bring a pang of nostalgia to those who remember it, and the United States Library of Congress has recognized its value and decided to add it to the National Recording Registry, or NRR. So there we go, a couple of perhaps disputable details there, but hey, you got to ring these things out and make a bit of a story of it. So whatever, it's a sunny weekend, we're not going to nitpick. Let's continue with the story. So the NRR is an expansive library of sounds. NRR, that's difficult to say, isn't it? NRR, should we call it the NRR? The National Recording Registry. Anyway, it's an expansive library of sounds that are considered to have cultural or historical significance. The pieces listed for inclusion in 2025 include Elton John's hit album Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Absolute classic banger of an album, I have to say. Quite why that wasn't in there already, I don't know. Along with the original cast recording of the Hamilton stage musical. Okay, yeah. Under the terms of the National Recording Preservation Act of 2000, the Librarian of Congress, with advice from the National Recording Preservation Board, selects 25 titles each year that are culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant and are at least 10 years old. I'm really surprised Goodbye Yellow Brick Road wasn't in there already. It's a classic album. I do love a bit of Elton John, but yeah, so the Library of Congress blog post announcing the inclusion also features some information on how the Windows 95 startup sound was created. The short tune was composed by legendary British musician Brian Eno, who's best known for his work with Roxy Music. Brian Eno delivered 84 sound elements to Microsoft. The Windows 95 design team then spent a while sorting through the options until the iconic sound was decided on. Amazingly, the sound we are now familiar with was originally considered to be too long. However, the team thought it properly conveyed the sense of welcome, hopefulness, and progress that they wanted. Further details of the 2025 list of NRR additions can be found on the Library of Congress website. Shall we have a look at that? You know what? Let's have a look at that. So this is the Library of Congress website. Just agreed to cookies, thank you very much. Chicago's debut Chicago Transit Authority album. Hamilton, Mary J. Blige's My Life, Amy Winehouse's Back to Black. How did they overlook that? Wow, that's another great album. Microsoft's Reboot Chime and the soundtrack to the Minecraft video game have been selected as some of the defining sounds of history and culture that will join the National Recording Registry of the Library of Congress. So there we go. Tracy Chapman's self-titled debut album, Celine Dion's 1997. This list, this should be the headline here. Let's dig into this. Celine Dion's 1997 single, My Heart Will Go On, from Titanic, of course. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans' classic Happy Trails, Miles Davis jazz fusion album, which is Brew. Charlie Pride's groundbreaking Kiss an Angel Good Morning. Vincent Fernandez' enduring ranchera song El Rey. Freddie Fender's breakthrough song Before the Next Teardrop Falls. And Steve Miller Band's Fly Like an Eagle. Oh, it's a great year for the the National Recording Registry, isn't it? Some bright bangers on there. And the Windows 95 startup sound. So I guess that's the retro computing connection that we've been looking for. So there we go. Story that's been doing the rounds this week. The Windows 95 startup sound, as created by Brian Eno, quite famously, is now part of the National Recording Registry of the US Library of Congress, alongside some other classic bangers from the past. There you go. These rambles usually feature a regular segment called Video of the Week, wherein I talk about a video that I've seen in the past week that has entertained or inspired or educated or otherwise improved my life in some way. And this week, we will be sticking to that formula. It will be along very shortly. But first up, I want to do something a little bit different in that same vein, inspired by that kind of formula. And this is Headline of the Week. Now, this was posted over on my Discord server, I think by Steve's Tech Shed. I think. Steve, I'm going to give you credit for this because I can't find it now, but I'm pretty sure it was you who posted it. Or maybe not. Maybe I just dreamed that and somehow found this all on my own. But this did make me laugh, and this is connected to the Switch 2 announcement from last week. Of course, Nintendo had that big press event where they invited a load of big YouTubers and people from the press to go and poke around the Switch 2, their upcoming console, and they also announced the release date and the price for that as well, which I did talk about last week, and a load of games, which I didn't really talk about. I kind of mentioned Mario Kart, and that was pretty much it. But anyway, this is relating to that, and it did amuse me quite a lot. So prepare yourself for the headline. Here it comes. So, Polygon.com, and this is the headline. Video game titles like Super Mario Party Jamboree, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Jamboree TV, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Star-Crossed World, are too long, and I think Nintendo should do something about it. I see what they did there. That is brilliant, isn't it? So yes, Michael McWhirter over on Polygon.com. I salute you for your long-winded headline writing skills. And the subheading here is just a plea for brevity. So yeah, it's just a bit of a rant about how I say a rant. Perhaps that's a little bit harsh, but yeah, just kind of pointing out how long some of the titles of some of these games are now. Particularly, when you compare them to some of the earlier Nintendo titles. Of course, it mentions here that Nintendo did DX or deluxe versions of some of their older games when they kind of upgraded them ever so slightly for newer systems, like the Game Boy Color versions of Game Boy games and stuff like that. Why not do that? Why tag all of the Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus TV, Jamboree, whatever on the end of it? And I am totally in agreement with this. Game titles are too long. Make them shorter, Nintendo. And yeah, Michael McWhirter, excellent little rant here. Not quite sure how you managed to get quite so many paragraphs out of it, but it was quite an amusing read. And I did enjoy the headline, so thank you. And while we are on the topic of the Switch 2, I suppose we should take a look at this story from Technic. Again, thank you ever so much, Technic, for submitting this. You're still on a roll, so well done. And this is interesting because it's to do with the backwards compatibility. So there is a bit of a retro connection here, of course. Consoles backwards compatible with their previous iterations or their forefathers, their forebearers, their predecessors. Yeah, we'll go with that. Famously we had like the Mega Drive or the Genesis, for example, had an actual official cartridge that let you stick a Master System game in it and play Master System games on that. Are there any earlier examples I can think of backwards compatibility? I think, in fact, I know the first console that claims to have been officially backwards compatible without any kind of external hardware add-on or anything like that was actually the Atari 7800, which I believe came out in 1986. And was officially backwards compatible with the 2600 because it used the TIA chip, which of course was basically essentially a whole 2600 on chip. Somebody's going to dispute that. Go ahead down in the comments. And that basically allowed the 7800 to play those earlier 2600 games. Of course, the cartridges were the same shape and used the same connector and everything else, so you just plugged them straight in. And that's something that modern day Atari has kept with the 2600 Plus and the 7800 Plus as well, which have been featured on Control.Reese quite recently. Excellent little link there, Reese. Well done. So yeah, backwards compatibility has been quite a big selling point for consoles going back to the earliest days of games consoles, and kind of got quite big with the Xbox and the PlayStation. Kind of in that era, really kind of caught its stride. The Xbox 360 did software backwards compatibility with the original Xbox, and the situation with the PlayStation 1, the PlayStation 2, and the 3 was all very similar. There's certainly things that I am familiar with. And it's, of course, something that Nintendo picked up as well. So when we got the DS, when we got the Game Boy Advance, it could play Game Boy cartridges. And then we got the DS, that could play Game Boy Advance cartridges. And it's something that they kept up with the Wii. The topic of my most recent video on my main channel on Control.Reese. And yeah, very much a thing. Backwards compatibility, whether it's done via hardware or software. I know obviously famously Microsoft went down the software route, but Nintendo tended to go down the hardware route, essentially just by making each console a mildly upgraded version of the previous one. So like the Wii was compatible with the GameCube because it was essentially just a mildly upgraded GameCube. And then we got the Wii U, which was just a bit of an iteration on the Wii. And of course that was backwards compatible with those games. This is a proper ramble, isn't it? Wow. Anyway, enough about backwards compatibility in the past. Let's have a look at this story. So this is to do with the Switch 2, and this is from an official interview with Nintendo on their actual website. So the headline here over on gamesradar.com, as submitted by TechNick, is Switch 2 plays Switch 1 games through something in between a software emulator and hardware compatibility. So don't expect the same backward compatibility we got on 3DS and Wii U. And the subheading here, Switch 2 doesn't contain any Switch hardware, which is a direct quote from that interview, as is the in between a software emulator and hardware compatibility. So, yeah, quite interesting here. They have announced that it will let you play a broad range of many of the original Switch's library, but it isn't completely all-encompassing. Nintendo says there will be some notable technical challenges in fully supporting the previous system's library. Of course, the Switch, I believe, was based on the NVIDIA Tegra platform, I think. It turns out the Switch 2 isn't just a slightly upgraded version of that. So that's quite interesting in and of itself. And they quote the interview here, when we first started Switch 2 development, the focus was on enhancing its performance as hardware, namely expanding its capacity. Switch 2 director Takahiro Dota says in an official interview. So compatibility was a lower priority. For example, Nintendo DS games were playable on Nintendo 3DS, and Wii games were playable on Wii U, but it was difficult to achieve the same level of compatibility with Switch 2 because the hardware design approach was different from those systems. Simply put, those systems were compatible because Nintendo 3DS contained Nintendo DS hardware and Wii U contained Wii hardware. Producer Koichi Kawamoto explains. However, Switch 2 doesn't contain any Switch hardware. So instead, the Switch 2 uses something in between a software emulator and hardware compatibility with a process that converts Switch 1 data into something the Switch 2 can handle in real time as the game runs. A true software emulator would take too great a toll on the system's battery, Nintendo says. So, they have published a list of Switch games that won't run on the Switch 2, and there are some notable names in there, including highly demanding ports like Doom Eternal, and certain emulated games, including several Arcade Archives titles. Those games won't launch at all, but there's an additional list of games that work with some in-game compatibility issues, including Fall Guys, Factorio, and Alien Isolation. Great game, Alien Isolation. Did enjoy that game. But, yeah, so... They haven't announced how this works. I'm guessing it's probably something similar to the way that Steam plays Windows games on Linux, maybe with Proton. It's like a translation layer that translates system calls from one platform, one OS to another. Hopefully we'll find out a little bit more about how this works. But they're claiming that it's not a full-blown software emulator. Of course, a software emulator would essentially have to emulate the entire Switch hardware and the BIOS and everything else and kind of run the games within that environment. So I can see why they haven't taken that approach. But yeah, it does look quite interesting, doesn't it? I would be very interested to see how this works. I imagine with it being Nintendo, of course, third-party hackers are going to break this thing wide open and they're going to run with it and probably, fix the games that don't actually work, because that's what they tend to do. Of course, similar happened with the Xbox 360. But yeah, there we go. So that's quite interesting. The Switch 2 is not an upgraded Switch, and its backwards compatibility also isn't full-blown software emulation. Some kind of translation thing going on here. And hopefully we'll learn a little bit more about the technical side of that in due course, although almost definitely not from Nintendo itself. Love it or hate it, it's hard to deny the sheer influence that Microsoft has had on the computing industry over the years. Of course, perhaps most notably with Windows. I guess Windows is pretty important as far as the history of computers is concerned. Microsoft Office, Internet Explorer, the Xbox, in the world of gaming, and of course, who could forget the Zune, perhaps Microsoft's most important product. But I should say, actually, I do have my original Zune up here, which I imported from the US when they were brand new because they didn't officially sell them in the UK, the very first original model. I should do a video about those. There's some really cool mods and things that you could do with those. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the Zune today, unfortunately. We are here to talk about a very important anniversary in the history of Microsoft, as alluded to in my Windows 95 story earlier. Not only is it the 30th anniversary of Windows 95 this year, but it's the 50th anniversary of Microsoft itself. And Bill Gates has marked the occasion with a rather impressive blog post, which I believe is an excerpt from his new autobiography, Source Code, which I do own, and I have actually started reading, but I really need to get back into that. I got distracted. Believe it or not, I am quite easily distracted. But yeah, this is really impressive. So, it's this interactive blog post over on gatesnotes.com. And it's the story of how they created their very first product, which was a version of BASIC, the basic programming language for the Altair computer. So the headline here, as written by Mr. Gates himself, celebrate 50 years of Microsoft with the company's original source code. So before there was Office or Windows 95 or Xbox or AI, there was Altair BASIC. And there's a picture here of the cover of Popular Electronics, which is apparently when the Altair actually first came up on Bill Gates' radar. And the headline here on this, what is this? January 1975. The world's first mini-computer kit to rival commercial models, the Altair 8800. And of course, this isn't a computer as we would recognise them today. It doesn't come with a keyboard or a monitor or anything like that. Perhaps... what's kind of widely considered to be the very first PC, or at least the first DOS PC, the first kind of Intel, DOS-compatible PC, was of course the IBM 5150 in 1981. And this kind of predates that by 6 years. It's amazing to see kind of how much progress was made in those 6 short years as well. So, yeah, the Altair, it's a metal box with a load of switches and LEDs and things, but it is I believe it was an S100 backplane system that took all of those cards, so you could make your own cards for it. And of course, there was a bit of an industry that sprung up around the machine with add-ons and things to add various bits of functionality to it, as well as being very popular with hobbyists and stuff as well, because it was so kind of open and expandable. And also where Bill Gates and Paul Allen, the founders of Microsoft, got their start with programming. So, yeah, although they actually developed BASIC on a different system, but it talks about that in the article. So let's just read the article, shall we? Straight from the horse's mouth. So the coolest code I've ever written is the subheading here. In 1975, Paul Allen and I created Microsoft because we believed in our vision of a computer on every desk and in every home. 5 decades later, Microsoft continues to innovate new ways to make life easier and work more productive. I would argue about the making life easier part, but there we go. Having seen the state of Windows 11. Making it 50 years is a huge accomplishment, and we couldn't have done it without incredible leaders like Steve Ballmer and Satya Nadella, along with the many people who have worked at Microsoft over the years. Although I am excited to celebrate the anniversary, reaching this milestone feels bittersweet. I always love reflecting back on Microsoft's history and dreaming about its future, but it's also hard to believe that such a significant piece of my life has been around for a half-century. It feels like just yesterday that Paul and I were hunched over the PDP-10 in Harvard's computer lab, writing the code that would become the first product of our new company. And there we go. There's a picture of Bill Gates and Paul Allen, the founders of Microsoft, writing some code on an old teletype terminal type thing. I'm not going to read the entire article to you because it is very, very long, but it is very interesting. I do think Bill Gates is actually a surprisingly articulate writer, and I do enjoy reading his books and his kind of autobiographies and stuff. I read quite a few of them over the years. And as mentioned, this one is also on my list. I have seen a few people point out on the internet, and I must admit I had noticed this too. As you kind of wave your mouse cursor over things in this article, the characters all jumble up and turn into different ASCII characters. And if you're the kind of person who likes to follow along with the mouse cursor as you read stuff, you're going to really struggle to read this. So perhaps that's a ruse to get you to buy the book. But anyway, really long, interesting article. Some great historical photos in here as well, and some great ASCII art as well to kind of illustrate various points and things. Some nice animated bits here as well. Look at this. Doesn't that look good? And it's just the story of how they adapted the basic programming language to work on the Altair 8800. So really interesting bit of kind of historical documentation here. Of course, they didn't have access to the Altair initially, so they used Harvard's PDP-10 computer to program that. I was going to say mainframe there. It's not, is it? Is it a mini computer? No, it's a PDP-10. This is all prehistoric stuff. But the cool thing here is that you can download the code itself and have a look at it. Now, you might think, some places are reporting that this has been released as open source, and I'm not sure that's strictly true. And oddly enough, it hasn't been released on GitHub. as actual code that you can kind of run in an Altair emulator and kind of modify and poke around yourself. No, the official release of this is actually as a PDF. And not only is it a PDF, but these are scans of the original pages of a tractor-fed printout of the original code. So this is proper old school stuff. 157 pages of this, but it is really interesting to look at, so you can have a look at this. It's got the date of 10th September 1975 on it at 12 minutes past 3. I assume that's in the early hours of the morning, because I think Bill Gates quite famously used to use the computer lab overnight when classes weren't running and stuff like that, because he was that obsessed with computers and wanted it all to himself. Which, again, is quite an interesting piece of history and a bit of Bill Gates lore. But yeah, so this is it. It's quite really, really nicely commented code, I must say. There are some really big sections in here that are just purely comments, just explaining how it all works. And we've got copyright 95 by Bill Gates and Paul Allen here. 1975. Originally written on the PDP-10 from February the 9th to April the 9th. Bill Gates wrote the runtime stuff. Paul Allen wrote the non-runtime stuff. Monty Davidoff wrote the math package. And there's even a to-do list in here as well, which any modern-day programmer will be familiar with. I'm sure. I've certainly had a lot of stuff that's gone into production that still has all of its to-dos intact. But hey, as long as you get the invoices in and get paid, that's all that counts. Anyway, so yeah, this is the release of the original source code from 1975 for Altair Basic, as written by Bill Gates and Paul Allen, and also a really fascinating article here that goes into the history of that as well, taken from his new autobiography, Source Code, which again looks to be quite interesting. I'm not quite sure what new stuff is in there over and above his previous books, but I look forward to finding out. But if nothing else, important to mark, a real milestone in the history of computing. 50 years of Microsoft. I don't know. Who'd have thought? I have had quite a lot of submissions to this week's Ramble, so I'm going to do a bit of a quick fire round in a moment just to rattle through those, because I would hate for anyone to be left out, and actually they're all really interesting things that I think you should check out. But speaking of interesting things that you should check out, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some games for a moment. Just a couple of games that have come up on my radar. One that I've played in the past week and really, really enjoyed, and I think if you have similar taste in games to me that you will enjoy it too, and you've probably not come across it. And another one which was released in the past week, which, well, let's just hop straight into it. So this is the Talos Principle Reawakened. And if you are a long-term listener to these rambles, you will know that I have absolutely raved and raved about the Talos Principle. Of course, made by Crow Team, who made the Serious Sam games originally. And the original version of the Talos Principle, because it came out like 10 years ago, was on the Serious Sam engine, wasn't it? And they decided to basically take that and make a puzzle game out of it. And it was surprisingly good. And as the story as well, really kind of interesting and thought-provoking story about the nature of humanity and consciousness and, this kind of post-apocalyptic whole thing that was kind of going on. I love stuff like that. And the puzzles are great too, as you might expect. Just all around a fantastic package. So they decided to remake it off the back of the success of Talos Principle 2. They decided to remake the original game in Unreal Engine 5, as per Talos Principle 2. So what this is a massive graphical upgrade to the original game. The puzzles, as far as I know, are all exactly the same. It's essentially just a remake of that game, but that's no bad thing. And I would really love to get back into this and play it all again. I do think $33.99 is perhaps a bit on the pricey side. As far as games go, it wasn't as big as the sequel, and it's essentially quite an old game that I've already played. But hey, when I'm looking for a winter game to pick up when the nights are starting to draw in again, much as I hate to, let's not think about that. But later on in the year, in a Steam sale or something, I'm probably going to pick this up and play through it again. But I need to mention it because it's a Talos Principle game, and it's one of my favourites of all time. So there you go. If the original passed you by, or you're a massive fan and would like to experience it again with those massively enhanced graphics, that is now a thing that you can go out and buy. And in fact, you can buy the whole collection if you so wish. But yeah, the other game that I wanted to talk about is kind of in the same vein. It's It's Unreal Engine again, so it's a really stunning looking game, and it's a puzzle game, I guess, to some extent, and it's a very philosophical puzzle game as well that tries to get you thinking and tries to get you pondering on similar topics. This is a game called Indica. Indica with a K, so Indika. Let's just go back and play the trailer. There we go. And this is a game where you play as a nun who has the devil as her sidekick. That is in the actual game description as well, so I'm not spoiling anything there, but I don't want to spoil too much. In fact, I don't really want to spoil anything about the story because I went into this not really knowing much at all about it other than that. So yeah, the description here is play a third-person, story-driven game set in alternative Russia at the turn of the 19th century, where religious visions clash with harsh reality. Indica tells the story of a young nun who sets off on a journey of self-discovery with the most unusual companion by her side, the devil himself. Recent reviews very positive, all reviews very positive, and this was released about a year ago in May 2024. Developed by Odd Meter and published by 11-Bit Studios. Now, there is a retro gaming connection to this as well, I must say. There are segments in this game where it goes all kind of 8-bitty, platformy. You've got a game that's kind of inspired by Pac-Man, and you've got like a classic kind of platforming section, and it's all tied in. They're like these kind of visions that are kind of tied into the main story itself. So they're a lot of fun kind of in and of themselves, but just a really kind of stunning looking game and something very, very different to anything I've played before. Very, very short. I think it took me 5 hours. Yeah, 5.4 hours it says here that it took me to complete it. And that was with thoroughly exploring everything in great detail. But yeah, it's an odd game. I highly recommend that you check it out. This was recommended to me by someone over on Blue Sky, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to find the original post about that, so I can't thank the person for recommending it to me, unfortunately. But big thanks if that was you and you are a listener or a viewer. It's $20.99, and all right, it only takes 5 hours, but I really enjoyed this. I've raved about this quite a lot, haven't I? But yeah, just, I like to kind of give these indie games a bit of a shout out when I can, if I particularly enjoyed them or found them a bit different and a bit interesting. And this I most certainly did. There is some I will say there are some, I would check out the content warnings and things on this because there is some quite shocking subject material that is dealt with in this game, and I'd probably at least go and have a look into that. I don't really want to kind of dwell on that, but it's life, it's thought-provoking, and kind of, yeah, it is what it is. Great game. So go and check out Indica. And yeah, Talos Principle Reawakened is also now a thing that you can go out and play on your PC if you like. Personally, though, I'd recommend getting out in the sun while it lasts. Right, so as promised, it's time for a bit of a quickfire round of some of the stuff that's been submitted to the Discord this week that hasn't been featured in its own separate segment. Because, as mentioned, there's quite a lot of stuff. And I'm going to do this ever so slightly differently to the way that I've done it in the past by taking you deep into the heart of my Discord server itself, if you've never experienced Discord. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you're now looking at my actual Discord server and all of its various channels and whatnot. So yeah, so of course we have the submission here from Katrina about the weather for Grand Prix 2. Done the 50 years of Microsoft, I submitted that. Done Technic's story about the Switch. Thank you ever so much for that. So this is one from Mimo. Yeah, Mimo, I think that's right. All about FujiNet. Of course, I did a video about FujiNet a couple of months ago now. A fantastic little device that you can plug into your Atari 8-bit computer. And you can go online with it, and you can play, you can play games, play disk images, tape images, that kind of thing. And there's also like an online lobby with online games and things that you can access. Online-enabled programs for those 8-bit computers, specifically the Atari, but it is also it's starting to support other platforms as well now. And like things like live weather, that kind of thing. So I thought it was really impressive, and they have hit a milestone this week in that FujiNet 1.5 is now out. So you can go and check that out. Another story here from Technic. He's suggested this as a candidate for video of the week. Now, this is a really interesting, I did watch this video actually. This is a really interesting kind of tutorial on how to get Windows 3.x set up on DOSBox. and how you can get like high resolutions and stuff like that. So really useful kind of tutorial and quite an interesting video in and of itself. Now, one thing that Nick does point out, and I also noticed in the comments as well, is that unfortunately, the Nova Spirit Tech, the actual guy behind this channel, Don, sadly passed away a few months ago from cancer. So yeah, I thought that was worth kind of acknowledging. And yeah, it's always kind of, I suppose the thing is that to try to, but of course it's an awful thing. I know people, I've lost people to cancer and known people that have survived it, thankfully. But you know, I suppose as long as these videos are kind of being kept alive and people are still watching them, that's quite a nice legacy, I guess. So worth checking out, and of course I will link it. I will link it in the usual places along with all of these other stories. But yeah. Yeah, it is what it is, I guess. Of course, my condolences to Don and his kind of friends and family. But yeah, he does some great videos over on his channel, and in particular, this one all about Windows 3 on DOSBox. So there you go. That work was not in vain. If we continue, Gravitone has submitted. I really enjoyed this one. I nearly made this its own story, in fact. The Louvre in Paris, of course, the famous art gallery, has apparently been using Nintendo 3DSs for its interactive guides, and it has been doing this since 2012. And they've just announced that they're going to be discontinuing this in September this year. So they're going to actually stop using Nintendo 3DSs for their interactive museum guides. So this is a story over on TheVerge.com. And they have interactive maps, audio commentaries, and themed tours apparently running on the 3DS. And Mimo here has speculated that maybe they might be using the Switch 2 now. So who knows? And as DBK has also pointed out, what are they going to be doing with these? I mean, they've got 5,000 of these 3DSs. Are they going to be selling them on eBay, or perhaps disposing of them in some other way? Perhaps a good source of 3DSs. Who knows? Anyway, another story from Mimo here about the Commodore Amiga port of Open Lara. Of course, that open source implementation of the original Tomb Raider game. And apparently that is now available. There is now a demo of that available on the Amiga, which is really cool to see. Loads of cool stuff going on in the Amiga world, as always. And Gravitone has also chipped in with a video of this running on the CD TV. So you can go and check those out. Of course, again, I will be linking to all of these down in the description. Seuss has posted a link to a video from a channel called Jay Beretta, and this is a Micro Machines-like game for the Saturn. So it's called Micro Motor Mayhem. Very similar, but of course, unlike the original kind of much-loved Genesis or Mega Drive game, or at least that's the platform I played it on back in the day. This is kind of in this kind of top-down kind of 3D perspective. Of course, the Saturn, well known for its 3D performance and being kind of one of the earliest of those 3D consoles. And yeah, this looks really cool. It's you know, a homebrew game based on Micro Machines. We really do need a new Micro Machines game or something similar, don't we? You know, but anyway, yeah, if you have a Saturn, you can go and check that out. Micro Motor Mayhem. Or I guess you could also play it on the Saturn core on the Mister. That might be a good way to enjoy it. James here, Encot Technology. He has his own YouTube channel, and this is a Spectrum demo. Yeah, apparently is a demo that features a Z80 emulator written in Z80, all in just 64 kilobytes on the Spectrum. And it's called Pimp My Spectrum by 8-Bit. So there's a video of that, yeah, with AY sound as well. So that is that's that. And a submission here from Kosiak as well. This was another submission for a potential video of the week, but I haven't actually gotten around to watching this yet. So if I do watch this in the next week and it turns out to be good, it may well be next week's video of the week. So get ahead of the curve and check this out now. This is Shareopolis, and a video all about Atari 2600 games that push the limits from the biggest to the smallest. Of course, yeah, 128 bytes, some of those games on the 2600. Amazing, really, when you compare it to some of the stuff that's around today. Another story from Mimo again, and this is the best game this year at the BAFTAs, which, of course, has gone to Astrobot, a very worthy winner. And there has been a lot of love for Astrobot on the Discord this week. So, well, one worth checking out. And Steve's Tech Shed has submitted a video from a relatively small channel called The Pioneers of Computer Graphics from 1960 to 1970. And this is part one in a multi-part series, a channel called Dimitris Katsaforos. And again, a video that I haven't got around to watching yet. But yeah, there you go. Looks quite interesting. And I have bookmarked it for watching this week. I have had a very busy week this week. Two more things that I've submitted. These are new snack cartridges for the Mr. Multi-System, if you're a multi-system fan like myself. So the snack cartridges allow you to use the original controllers with certain cores on the Mr. For the, of course, the most authentic experience, and they are incredibly low latency as well due to the way that they work, the snack interface. So this is a Sega Saturn snack cartridge, as mentioned. Of course, you could check out that Micro Machines game. And you can use the original Saturn controllers by plugging this cartridge into your multi-system. And yeah, you can also use it with the standard Mr. Snack as well. Snack? Stack. You can use this snack with the Mr. Stack, as per Heber's other, of course, multi-system add-ons. So that looks really cool. I am a big fan of the Saturn port because it is a console that's very much passed me by, and I have gone in and kind of explored some of its library thanks to the Mister, which is always really cool. There's also a dual NES snack cartridge, or NES if you like. That is now available for the Mister, and again, it's compatible with the original NES and Famicom controllers. Although the Famicom controllers were built into the console, weren't they, Richard, technically? I know what you mean, though. They're the external ones. But anyway, and the Zapper. You can also use the original NES Zapper with this snack, which is really cool. And again, you can use it with the multi-system, slot it straight into the cartridge slot, or you can plug it into your Mr. Stack via USB. And finally, another submission by Mimo here, and this is Indiana Jones, of course, the new Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, the new game that has just been released to rave reviews, a really highly rated and much loved game. And this channel, 64 Bits, has turned it into a 1992 adventure game, and there is a video of that over on YouTube that you can go and check out. So there we go, that's the quickfire submissions round, and now none of you feel left out, hopefully. And that, dear viewer, brings us around quite neatly to my regular Video of the Week feature, wherein I talk about a video that I've watched on YouTube in the past week that has educated or entertained or informed or enlightened or otherwise improved my life in some way. Now, I must admit, I haven't been watching a lot of YouTube this week. I've been working on my own video, which I will talk about in a moment, because that was quite a biggie. Really good to get that one out of the door, and it does seem to be doing quite well in these early stages, which is always good to see. But there are a couple that caught my attention that I wanted to talk about, and hey, they may have come up on your radar anyway, and if they have, well, you know, you have great taste in videos. So the first one I wanted to talk about is a video from a small channel that you might not have heard of, but I do want to give him a bit of a shout out because he is doing some great work. This is a channel called LGR, and it's a guy called Clint, and he lives in, I think he lives in North Carolina, so perhaps, yeah, is that where Mr. Beast lives as well? Evidently something in the water over there as far as YouTube is concerned. But yeah, of course, LGR, one of the pioneers of retro computing YouTube. Thoroughly bloody nice guy, and I haven't actually heard from him in a while, so nice to see that he's doing well. But he's building himself a new gaming PC, and it's been quite a while since Clint has done one of these. I mean, this is 40 minutes long, this video, and I actually sat and watched this, which is unusual for me with these longer videos. I tend to stick them on in the background and end up just ignoring them. But yeah, he's built himself, finally, a new gaming PC. Partly because his got destroyed when his house got destroyed. I mean, I probably shouldn't laugh about that, but he's kind of choosing to see the brighter side of it, and it is all getting resolved. And you know, he has got the support and stuff that he's needed, thankfully. So I guess you can look back in hindsight and just say, hey, you know, as long as he's okay and everyone involved is okay, then that's a good thing. Property can be rebuilt. And speaking of rebuilding things, yeah, he's building himself a new PC to replace the one that was hit by a tree, despite the fact that it was in his living room at the time. But yes, it's some interesting hardware here, because I don't keep up to date with all the latest hardware developments and things. And to be fair, I don't think Clint really does either. You know, he's much more of a retro guy like myself. So just quite interesting to see what's out there and the SSD options and stuff and graphics cards and things like that. He's also inspired me to upgrade my own gaming PC. he actually uses the same case that I use in this. So he's got the fractal North with the wood on the front. There we go. There's the case, the Fractal North XL. Beautiful case. He's gone for the version with the window. I went for the one with the mesh side, but there you go. That's real walnut on the front there, by the way. Such a lovely thing. Yeah, but anyway, so he has inspired me to upgrade my own gaming PC as well, because mine's running a Ryzen 7 2700X, which is quite a low-end CPU by today's standards. So I'm reliably informed, although I do have a Radeon 7800 XT graphics card, which was very kindly sold to me by Rich, a long-term supporter of the channel, at a very good price, so thank you. And yeah, I think the CPU has become a bit of a bottleneck, so I'm going to upgrade that, I think, to a 5700 X3D. I think is about the right kind of balance of price and performance at the moment, and that's one of the one of the sort of highest end CPUs that my motherboard can take. I think that makes sense. I don't really want to spend a fortune replacing all the motherboard and stuff, because I'm generally quite happy with it, but I'm just feeling a bit inspired. And Clint's got a fancy new PC, so I want one too. Anyway, so that's that. And yeah, one of these types of videos that we haven't seen from Clint in quite a while, understandably so. A longer build video and just a really nice chilled experience. So well worth checking out if that one hasn't come up on your radar. And I also wanted to give a bit of a shout out to another channel as well, who's been a big inspiration to me. And this is Action Retro. And I mean, Sean is absolutely relentless in his release schedule. And to be fair, every single video that he does is really interesting. Some of the stuff that he gets up to with these old, kind of rescuing these older computers and repurposing them and showing how they can still be useful today with like modern operating systems and stuff, I think is quite a worthy cause. And it's always interesting to see. And what he has here is a first generation MacBook Air, one of the early Intel ones. And of course, these are limited. I think they have 4 gig of RAM soldered to the motherboard, which you can't upgrade. Basically completely unupgradable in that true modern Apple fashion. And he shows a Linux distribution running on this called MX Linux, which I believe is based on Ubuntu. And I was just really impressed with the performance of this, just the sheer performance on this machine. And of course, these early MacBook Airs, you can get them relatively cheap nowadays, and they're fanless. The battery life is ridiculously good on them. They weigh next to nothing, and they're tiny, and yet they're still reasonably powerful for what they are. I mean, you can watch YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff, and the performance is still very good if you run a lightweight operating system such as MX Linux. So I was really interested to learn about this because it wasn't a distro that I'd come across before and not one that I have any experience with. And I actually now have one of these early Intel MacBook Airs as well. So it's kind of giving me some inspiration as to what to do with that. But yeah, 10-minute long video introduced me to a new Linux distribution that I wasn't familiar with. And I think saving this early hardware and making it useful for actual real modern day stuff is quite worthy. So there you go. Of course, it's something that I do quite a bit on my own channel as well. So 2 videos of the week this week, probably ones that you may have seen if you are active in the retro computing sphere. But if nothing else, I've shared my opinions on them, and that's got to be worth something. And finally, I have released a video just today over on my main channel, Control-Alt-Reese, and this one's all about the Nintendo Wii. So, yeah, not a topic I've covered on the channel previously, but it is my actual Nintendo Wii that I've owned from new, and I've been wanting to do this upgrade for such a long time now. And the trouble is, when you have a YouTube channel like I do, and you have stuff that's potential content for that channel, you end up putting it off until you can actually sit down and film it properly. And I'm ashamed to admit that this one has taken me over a year to get to this point. Yeah, this is a mod that I've had in my possession for over a year, and it's been sat on the shelf, and I've been dying to get around to do this. So I thought I would finally tackle it, and it has been a bit more of a long-winded project, I must say. But it did all come together quite nicely in the end, despite the ridiculously tiny soldering that I had to do to make this work. So this is adding HDMI to the Nintendo Wii, and this is a mod called the Electron AVE. Or it was called the AVE HDMI when I first got my hands on it. Made by Electron Shepherd. Really fantastic mod. It doesn't do any kind of fancy upscaling or anything like that, other than some very basic kind of scan doubling in some of the lower resolutions and like the interlaced modes. But yeah, really nice, clean 480p HDMI output from the Wii. It's based on GC Video, which was a HDMI output mod for the Nintendo GameCube. And it's a very fiddly install, as mentioned, so I was quite proud of the fact that this actually worked first time and wanted to share it with the world. So this video covers the Nintendo Wii, of course, a little bit about the story behind it, some of the video output options that were available when it was new, like composite and component, and also some modern options like the Wii to HDMI type adapters, those little things that plug into the back of the Wii, and why they're perhaps not quite as good as you might have thought. Just realised we've got a bit of reception going on here with the whole setting with the t-shirts and everything. But there you go, different hair. I tell you what, my hair has been quite the thing. Anyway, and the beard as well. Probably need to talk about the beard at some point. But yeah, I really enjoyed putting this video together, and it's nice to do a proper in-depth hardware modding project. I haven't done one for a short while, and yeah, good to get my teeth stuck into that. And I have actually been using this Wii as well. I've been actually been playing on this in the evenings. So yeah, actually got some use out of it too. So anyway, that's adding HDMI to the Nintendo Wii. It's a 21-minute long video. Of course, it will be linked in the usual places. I have a policy against making my own videos video of the week, as tempting as that might be. So that is that. And let's have a little look at the analytics as well, because I know you guys love analytics. I do anyway. So this one does actually seem to be performing slightly above average, which is good because my last video was a complete and utter flop. So yeah, this video has got 2,148 views, which is around the upper end of the 1,400 to 2,100 that your videos usually get. 48 more than usual, apparently, in the first 4 hours. And you can see the graph here, and it's starting to turn upwards. It's starting to turn moonwards. So maybe this one's heading to the moon. So what have we got here? 548 views in the last 60 minutes. Very good, YouTube. Thank you ever so much for pushing this to the correct audience. Don't really have any other stats to go on because it is early days yet, but nice to see this one doing well early doors, and hopefully it's useful to people. I know, of course, with the Switch 2 being announced and being released very, very soon, there's a lot of talk about Nintendo and about their consoles, and also a kind of a whole generation of people who had the Wii as a kid. I mean, I was what, university age when the I think I was actually working for a living when I got my Wii, 2006, 2007-ish. So, but yeah, of course, a whole generation of kids who grew up with it, who are now in their kind of late teens, early 20s, whatever, starting to get into this older technology, into nostalgia, into, the retro stuff, their own experience of the retro stuff. And my take on that has always been that retro is, whatever you grew up with and whatever you have a nostalgic connection to. It's certainly not my job to gatekeep. And I love the Wii. And let's face it, it's getting on for 20 years old, so yeah, it's us that's old. But anyway, on that note, that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble. So thank you ever so much for joining me. I hope you're enjoying your weekend in the sun. I hope you're all out in the garden if you have access to such a thing, or perhaps on the beach, or anywhere else people go to enjoy the sunshine. Listening to this. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, now's your cue to go outside. Thank you ever so much, and I will see you in the usual place at the usual time next week for Reese Rambles. Bye.